All right, it is time for us to get stuck into the burning platform. This is your chance to get up to date with all the stuff that's happening in the news. And Pumi and I will try to be useful interlocutors who try to bring you different points of view. We also invite people to the show who we think have different points of view. We've certainly had a few of those in the last few weeks, and we will continue to find all the people with all the different opinions from all the corners of South Africa. One of those people, and someone who is a fairly regular return champion here, is Phumlani Majozi, who we have with us this morning. Hey, Phumlani, how are you?
Good morning, sir. Good morning. I'm well, thank you. Hello, Phumi, as well. It's great to see you guys. It's great to be back.
It's good to see you, and I'm glad to see you have some light.
Phumlani, I'm so glad you dressed up for us.
I know.
Yeah, you guys are special. So I had to, pick up one of my best suits for this engagement.
I want to talk a little bit about you before we get into the burning platform, because you've been dealing with a lot more heat than usual in the last few weeks on Twitter. But maybe you have some things to say about that. I just want to quickly refer to Propaganda here, who says, I'm in a very dark place in my life at the moment, South Africa, which is, I think, true for a lot of us. Phumi actually brought up the happiness index and how we're all miserable and grumpy in South Africa at the moment. You actually brought that up last week, and that was a study by UJ, Pums?
Yes, it was. It was, and it found that South Africans are actually very grumpy right now, which happens when you can't boil water to make coffee, or you have to get dressed in the dark.
Of course. So, Phumlani, you have been receiving more than your usual amount, and you are one of those people who doesn't mind a little bit of to and fro on Twitter. But I noticed, and someone actually brought it to my attention, that you've been swatting a lot of flies on Twitter. Is it more than usual, or am I imagining it?
Well, it's more than usual. It keeps growing. So it is what it is. What can we do? We have to push. But the way you guys started about the matter of happiness and how people feel in South Africa, I must say that I have also, been engaging people as well, and people are frustrated by what is going on in the country. And the moment you talk about the impact, the blackouts, the power outages, the failures of Eskom have on people's lives, that's when you can see that frustration, because it changes their day. It changes how they work. If you are going to have stage 6, you are definitely going to have a population that is unhappy. So I think it's one of those times when we are seeing the failure of government policy or government's failure on its mandates when it comes to the current situation with Eskom, and we are seeing that frustration.
It's funny you say this is how South Africans adapt. You just mentioned, stage 6 is terrible. We can handle stage 4, but stage 6 is terrible. It's amazing how quickly we adapt, and we start to think, well, we're lucky because we only got stage 4 at the moment. And that's human nature, but it's also very South African. I mentioned this to Phumi earlier. We discussed it over and over, but Eskom have now said we must just expect stage 4 indefinitely. They're not even going to draw a curtain on this. They see it as being a permanent situation, stage 4, from here on in.
Yeah, just one thing to add on that, Gareth, it's that when you listen to the president over the past, I would say, a week or two or so, in fact, it was this week, if I'm not mistaken, where he said he would like us to be patient with him and his administration when it comes to the issue, and that we must basically accept that we have to live with this load shedding for a while. So it tells you of that this is becoming normalized, and we are not sure. No one knows when exactly could this thing be resolved. And it gets worse, by the way, because this thing is exacerbated or worsened by what I call the green politics, right? The obsession over the green energy, the renewable energies, in which the developing countries are pressured, and also some of its leaders are accepting to be pressured by developed nations to adapt to this fast pace of, green sort of energy. And I'm not sure we are ready for that, Gareth.
Well, yeah, Phumi and I kind of hinted at some of this already in the first hour of this morning's show, but I didn't want to preempt anything. Let's talk about some of the things that are on Phumi's agenda this morning. It's not often that she gets to actually decide what we're going to talk about, because usually we have a guest, so we end up talking about what that guest talks about. But luckily for us, Phumlani is someone who reads the newspapers, pays attention to the news, knows what's going on, listens to the politicians, even though it dries him out. Like all of us, it hollows us out when we have to listen to these people. So let's just talk quickly about Musi Maimane, because I didn't pay any attention. I will admit, I feel like I've heard it all before coming from Musi, but I heard from one or two people who I regard as fairly sensible sources that he had some quite interesting things to say. What did he say?
Look, I think, Phumlani, did you watch any of it? Did you have power to watch any of it?
A bit of it, and read more about it. So yeah.
Listen,
you're still in a better position than I am to adjudicate this. So go on. Let's be fair. Let's be objective. What do we want to give Musi a chance here to explain his position and what he wants to do? What did you take from it, Pums?
everybody should be given a chance to explain their position. But unfortunately, I mean, I felt that his position was a little bit lacking actually in substantive stuff, so we know that he doesn't believe that the ANC is where the end is, and he's kind of also talking what they're calling it a franchise model, because he started, remember, Musi Maimane started one movement, and it was about giving independents an opportunity to run, and he had a training sessions around the country for independents to run for the municipal elections, and and now he's then saying we're going to go into the next general election, and Musi is the chairperson of his party, but it is also a party for independence. So everybody can, like a broad church, as the ANC says, that all the independents can come together and band together. He has been able to attract some people who the current newly elected deputy mayor in Nelson Mandela Bay is one of his people. Your favorite friend, Mutsuli, who was on the show. She is the national spokesperson. And
Okay.
but it's still a little bit thin. It's the thing that I always come on the show and talk about, to say, I can hear all of these opposition people, and I understand that they are in opposition to the ANC, but they don't spend enough time telling us about their policies. They don't spend enough time telling us about what they do actually stand for, besides just being anti-ANC. And it was more of the same, unfortunately, with Musi. But, the proof will be in the pudding. What do you think, Phumlani, about what you saw?
Well, for me, it's it's broader than, at least I will start by saying that there is. I'm just wondering if in South Africa we are seeing a lot of new parties. We have a lot of parties right now. There are a lot in the country, and we are still seeing more of this. And I'm not sure what impact Musi will have, given the nature of our politics at this point and how many parties we've heard over the past years. So my view was that I wish he could have found somewhere to join and build something that's already been started, than to start something new, right? Because we've seen parties COPE was founded years back as well. It struggled. We've seen
But sorry, Phumlani, I don't mean to interrupt you, but he did come from another party, which he's very profoundly turned his back on. He has nothing nice to say about the DA. They also have nothing nice to say about him. That they parted very disagreeably. So he's tried that. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he thinks that the solution, and Phumi, we've had this discussion too. Yeah. The solution doesn't lie in the old parties. So why would you say that? Sorry, Phumi.
There are 621 parties, by the way, 621 registered parties in South Africa.
So now it's going to be 620, 622 now on top of that. But my point is that there is. I'm not sure. I just think we like to start our own parties. And my view is that I've asked us why couldn't you join him and Mashaba's party, Action XA, Action SA, and work
I
on the
think when you
differences they might have. I'm sure the one is immigration because Mashaba tends to take a tough stance on illegal immigration, and Musi Maimane seems to be softer and taking a bit of the EFF kind of thinking around immigration when it comes to our how we should treat fellow Africans or in the country. So I mean, the his vision is fine. I've never seen Musi Maimane as someone who would be bad for South Africa. I don't think I wouldn't rank him as the guys of the EFF. I wouldn't do that. I also wouldn't put him in that kind of thinking of the ANC as well. So his vision is not that bad in my view. The question is how it would play out. Is he going to have enough momentum to draw the support to build his own thing that he has already built? And if it doesn't work out in 2024, what is he going to do? So those
I
are
don't
the
think it's a
questions.
I don't think it's a bad thing starting your own party. You mentioned the EFF, they're a new party. You mentioned Herman Mashaba, he is a new party. I think with the vision, and which I don't believe Musi has a strong vision. That is really my thing about why he would find it hard to have traction is he really does not have a strong vision, or he is unable to articulate his strong vision to get galvanize people around him or around that vision,
I,
unlike what
I,
him
wa-
and Mashaba in the EFF were able to do.
I wonder about something, and maybe you could both help me with this. There are a bunch of people in our parliament, people like Bantu Holomisa, you could say Mosiwa Lekota, you could say Willie Madisha, you could say Kenneth Meshwe. It seems to me that there are a few people who get away with doing just enough to get a nice big salary and to get the words MP after their name. And we inspect these people every year like they're going to bring some novel idea to the table. We inspect these people as if they're going to be the kingmaker, or they can make a change, or they can draw more votes out of the audience. They don't ever seem to be able to do that. The track record for these parties is that they decline over time. All of them have. And
With
Bantu
the exception
Holomisa,
of
I
the
mean,
EFF.
how many times, and I've interviewed Bantu Holomisa maybe 4 or 5 times, how many more times must we speak to him to hear that he is an empty vessel? How many more times must we speak to Mosiwa Lekota before we figure out that he's also just banging the same old drum? How many times must we speak to even Musi Maimane before we realize that there's not a whole lot going on there? They're just looking for, they've seen already, they've found an easy way to be a part of the the national discourse. So they feel that their ego is being served. They also get a salary. They also sometimes, if they're lucky enough, get one or two of their friends in there as well, who also sit in parliament or who also sit on committees and get a salary. But it's just enough to run like a subsistence farming enterprise. It's like a subsistence politics, like a family office. It's just enough. Do you know what
Yeah.
I mean? I'm just sick of
No,
these people who are they're on the train, and then when it comes to criticizing the ANC, they have a lot to say. But as Phumi often says, they don't have a whole lot more than that. There's nothing else going on. We have to also stop paying attention to these sideshows because they are sideshows. To equate Bantu Holomisa with the largest opposition party is a joke. To equate Mosiwa Lekota with the EFF is a joke. The EFF and the DA are substantial parties, even though the EFF is smaller by a degree, by an order of magnitude. They may be half the size, maybe even smaller than the DA. The fact is that they are a real party. They can get into double-digit figures. No way in hell is Bantu Holomisa or Mosiwa Lekota ever going to get into those numbers, or Musi Maimane for that matter. Perhaps even you could say Herman Mashaba. So why are we giving them so much airtime and creating this false equivalence like these are also voices of the opposition, but we prefer them because they're not the DA or the EFF? Who are we kidding?
my sort of view, Gareth, is that I wish we could somehow have the opposition parties, especially the smaller ones, combining, right, to form an opposition, some sort of a party, one party, or
I
even
hate to
combining with
interrupt you, but why won't they? Because of ego.
That's where I was going to go. So you
It's not
said
good enough for
exactly
me
what
to
I'm
be
thinking.
Bantu and Mosiwa and the Vryheidsfront leader, whoever that is, because you never know. I think it's one of the Milders. They all have to be the leader, so they can't just
Exactly.
fall in.
Everyone wants to be a leader, Gareth.
They
Everyone
can't
wants to be a
fall
leader.
in and be useful in a bigger machine. They have to be their own man, which is kind of ridiculous. Because who cares?
And that is harming us, because if we don't have that stronger kind of, if the opposition parties cannot build something together and combine, that weakens their case against the ANC, right? It leaves people very much divided, and they divided as well. There's no stronger fight against the governing party, which is the
But
ANC.
then they are
Why?
just a
Because
coalition
everybody
of
wants to lead.
But then they're just a coalition of the disgruntled. I think what we then need to actually be talking about is the fact that what we don't have is we don't have true politicians, because the other thing about politics is about corralling people's interests into one place where they can vote together, vote as a block in order to be able to move. There is absolutely, and there's a reason why parliament sits in that horseshoe shape, right? Because the extreme left and the extreme right are really actually close to each other. But what we don't have is we don't have individuals, even a Mishwe, even a Kenneth Mishwe or a Bantu
Mm.
Holomisa. Their politicking ability is really not at a place where they are able to corral all of the individual interests of all of these various smaller parties to a place where they can find common ground and use that as the platform. So we don't have that kind of politics, and we don't have that kind of political leadership.
Yeah, yeah. I do think that's a good point.
Mm.
Oh, okay. So let's move on
But it
from.
will be interesting. But it will be interesting to see what Musi Maimane can do, because what he does have is he does have the experience. He does have the experience of kind of mobilizing people on the ground. So it will be interesting to see what it is that he can do going into
Well,
2024.
I mean, isn't it true that all of these people have some ability that we could harness? Like all of them have some traction with a crowd. All of them have some constituency, but on their own, it's hardly effective. And these grand coalitions where you need 23 parties to cobble together a majority in a tiny little town. It's really a waste of time, and we know that they're not going to be able to hold in the long run. So it would be more sensible for us as voters to not be swayed by this nonsense. You have Let's just be clear about this. You've basically got three options. And really, at this stage, this is the only sensible way I can see it working, unless some incredible, charismatic, brilliant party comes together with all the people that we like and none of the ones that we don't. And I don't see that as a reality. So you got three options. You can vote for the ANC and hope that they change and that they'll be better, but then I think you're chasing fool's gold. You can vote for the DA, or you can vote for the EFF. That's all you got. Right now, let's be realistic. That's what you got. Do you agree or do you disagree?
Well, I think, you see, my view is that given where Action SA comes from, I think how they did last year, they have potential. So I think people should consider them as well. But you are exactly right. So you have those three major parties, of which I'm strongly, as you know, I'm strongly against the ideas of the EFF and
Mm-hmm.
the ANC as well. So, but people, I think they should give the DA a chance. That's just my view. And also the work that has been done by Herman Mashaba as well in last year's local elections. He has potential. So if they can add that one in this top three as well, I think that would be better for South Africa.
You're gonna,
These
you're gonna,
people
you're
must
gonna have
stop
to hold.
starting parties.
Yeah, but they must stop starting
People must
parties.
stop starting parties.
But I don't mind. I don't mind if we need a healthy environment for new parties to start. And there are lots of people with brilliant ideas who just haven't found a home in any of the existing parties. I get that. But I think when it comes to trying to get a government working, we need to hold our noses for some things. I know, for example, like Phumi, you have your misgivings about Herman Mashaba. And if you were to vote for Herman Mashaba, you would have to hold your nose about certain things. If you were to vote for the EFF, you'd have to hold your nose for a lot more things. If you had to hold your nose for the DA, you'd also have to probably have 3 nostrils blocked. But I understand that all of us would like to have some party that would tick all the boxes. It's like having a relationship with somebody. You want them to be perfect. They must look great. They must make you feel great. They must be as clever or as dumb as you are. They must be as into the things that you are as you are. It's just impossible. Like you have to settle for less in a relationship. And I think the same is true here. But don't settle for so much less that you end up with worse than what we've currently got. That's all I'm saying.
Well, it's about who is least worst. For me,
so the current conversation that is happening, that is being driven almost in every sphere that you look, is the issue of coalition governments. You know, and I've said this before on the show, is my issue with parties like the DA or even the EFF is that they have taken a posture of being the opposition. They have not taken the posture of being the government, of what it is. And this is when you talk about holding your nostril, right?
Hold on, that isn't entirely true. I mean, the DA is the government in the Western Cape, and we have seen what the result of them being in government can deliver. So I don't know whether it's the leader nationally, whether it's John Steenhuisen's fault, where it may well be that he's not this great leader that we expect from a party in opposition, but he is not. To me, his personality and character is not the most important part of this. They have proven they can govern at a provincial and a city level. Yes,
I think on a national level, the DA takes a posture that they and we've heard it. You know, we've heard it from Helen Ziller before. We've heard it from many quarters within the DA that they believe that they have to. They are a strong opposition, and they're probably a 20% of a party that can hold the ANC. The ANC to some kind of standard and get them to work in a way that they want them to work. And I think what is it in Sunday's paper, actually, there was an article 2 weeks ago, a group of representatives from all of these parties, the ANC, the EFF, the DA, the VF, UDM, all of them, they went to Belgium on some kind of mission to find out how the coalition parties or the coalition government in Belgium is working. And that, for me, is where the issues lie, right? Is you cannot take all of the parties that are in government and say, how are we all going to work together in some kind of coalition? If you had 2 or 3 parties coming together to say, we have commonalities in these 3 places, and how could we be the 3 parties that become a coalition that can hold the ANC to account? Or be a coalition that can lead this country. This is what falls apart in the Johannesburg City Council. This is what falls apart at Nelson Mandela Municipality, because the guys are trying to say everybody can come together at the same time and create some kind of coalition together. No,
but I mean,
if you've got 2 or 3 parties, then you're able to.
Aren't you nitpicking and setting a much higher standard for the DA than you do for any other party by saying this? Because all we want from the ANC is just any sign, any distant heartbeat of competence, and there is none. And we're happy to accept that's the standard in the ANC. With the EFF, we wait for Julius to say something sensible, and he often does, and we think, oh, that's what we were waiting for. But with the DA, we expect a level of competence and a level of assiduousness which we don't seem to apply to other parties. All I'm saying is I don't see a fair standard being applied to all the parties at the same time. And it's fine for us to criticize the ANC or to criticize the EFF, but when we criticize the DA and we say, oh, well, it's their attitude that they still think of themselves as an opposition party and all of this stuff, those aren't the major stumbling blocks we have with Herman Mashaba or with Bantu Holomisa or with Musiwa or with Julius. We seem to impose a different set of standards on the DA, which is, I'm a bit confused by that. Is their standard not how well do you govern? In which case we have an example in the Western Cape. Clearly it works. That seems to me to be persuasive. No?
No. Okay, Phumlani, you go.
No, I wanted to speak about to add on what Gareth is saying. There has been a question of is there. Some people have argued that there is no alternative, which I have disagreed with. There are alternatives to the ANC in South Africa, and one of them is the DA. And when I say that, I get accused of being the DA supporter or member, of which really I'm not. I'm just saying to South Africans there is an alternative. There is a party
Mm,
that does have experience in governing and in governing a province, in addition to the some metropolitan places in the country. So there is an alternative that can, I believe, can work for South Africa. And one thing to add as well, when it comes to coalitions won't work. You know, for parties that govern in a coalition, they don't have to be too ideologically different. That's why we've been seeing this the collapsing of these coalitions, because you find in some instances that you have people who are so ideologically different. So rather have people whom like really kind of, at least there are minimal sort of things that you, on basic principles that you agree upon, then you can try and govern on something. But if you are too opposed, like it's the DA and the EFF, the far left Leninist sort of Marxist EFF, and the DA that is more kind of pro market, pro business, pro individual liberty, you are not going to achieve much, really. It's going to be little that you achieve.
Mm, mm, mm. I don't think that it is holding anybody to a different standard. The same standards that I apply to the DA is the same standards that I keep saying, even with him and Mashaba's party, is you've got to convince me that what you stand for and what you will be able to deliver. And all I'm saying is I hear that the DA is able to do it in the Western Cape for some parts of the Western Cape. Why are they failing to translate that message to the rest of the country? In the same way that I keep saying to you, the EFF has plateaued because their messaging is also unable to translate to the rest of the country. They may resonate with a small urban youth, but the reason why they are unable to grow anywhere else in the country is because we are largely a rural country, right? And their message does not translate into those areas. That's why they have
no, we don't.
plateaued
I
as a
don't think
party.
I don't think we're a rural country anymore. I think that the only parts of the country that really matter anymore are the urban areas. There are far more people living in the urban areas. There are far more people
No,
who are
KZN is
desperate.
still the most populous country in the most populous
Most
province in the country.
Yes, but KZN is not the most important manufacturing engine, or the place of most jobs, or the place of most
But
opportunity for
that's not
people.
how we vote. But that's not how we vote. We
No, no,
vote
no. I
by
get
where you are.
but then KZN, as the most populous province, should try and stand on its own 2 feet instead of using Joburg money. And I know I'm being pro Joburg on this, but like you, for me, I live in and work in Joburg. So the fact is that we can't. Again, you even said it now. The DA, you hear the DA delivers to certain parts of the Western Cape. Well, the ANC doesn't deliver to any parts of the rest of South Africa. So again, we may be creating a double standard here. Because if you're delivering to certain parts of the place that you're in charge of, and by and large, I see the Western Cape growing and becoming more successful, making itself energy independent. Certainly, the infrastructure seems to be maintained. They seem to be building more things. If you take that road from the airport to town, you see all the houses that have been built, and you see the solar panels, and you see the infrastructure that's been put in on soil that's only this deep because it's actually not arable land. I mean, it's the worst part that the apartheid government decided to give to black and colored people to live in. We know what happened in the past, but they've made it a whole lot more habitable than it's ever been before. And of course, you can also see Guguletu, Khayelitsha. These places have enormous, enormous challenges. But certainly more progress has been made in Khayelitsha and Guguletu than has been made in Tembisa, and that is a reflection on the ANC and their incompetence, not on the DA's lack of being perfect in the Western Cape.
Guys, the ANC's incompetence is without doubt. I think we all agree that there is a level of incompetence that is astounding when it
Mm.
comes to the ANC, right?
Yeah.
That we agree on. And the frustrations that people have, we agree on. And
Mm.
what I am saying to you, and this is not an apology for the ANC, it is a throwing down the gauntlet for the DA. When you have got, as the DA seems to have, a product that you can sell, why are they unable to move their product? Why are they unable to move their product? The question for me will remain. And this is also why Herman Mashaba, who came out of the DA, right, is all of these little things are the things that erode the brand that is the DA and what the DA can achieve and what the DA can show the people of South Africa and can lead. And these little things are the things that, and again, I will say to you, we don't vote by what this province is giving what money to the fiscal budget. We vote by where you are and what you hear the parties promise you and then deliver for you.
I don't disagree with you at all. And I don't want to labor this point too much because I think it'll get boring. And, Pumi, you and I think we agree on so much stuff that people find the burning platform sometimes to be predictable. But I think here, again, you even say little things, but I don't disagree that they have communication issues. And maybe they need to hire some consultants. And God knows they've tried over the last years to get people to help them to communicate their successes and to propose things to voters that will get more voters excited. But I don't know if there's anything more important than competence and delivery. And if competence and delivery are the only things that you should be measured by, then they are streets ahead of everyone else. And that's undeniable. I just don't think that, it's fair for us to expect them to be perfect, but for everyone else to just do one thing right. And that's the way it seems to me to be at the moment. And even when we look at like the Musis and the Hermans, and listen, I think I'm warmer to Herman Mashaba than you are, Pumi. And in some ways, I
Yes,
find
you
him,
are.
yeah, and in some ways,
You know,
I find some of his policies and ideas to be completely distasteful. I thought that the way that he made coalitions with the EFF and did backdoor deals with them, I thought that was reprehensible. And I find myself in a position now where I think I'm unable to vote for Herman Mashaba again. And I think that a lot of people probably feel that way. Many people feel that way about the DA. They look at the way that so many people who've left the DA were left because they were treated badly. There are still allegations that the party hasn't really transformed. There are all kinds of things that you could throw at them, but all of those things put together, to me, would be a less of a blight than the things that we're dealing with in some of the much bigger parties, like the ANC. Well, it's the only bigger party.
yeah, it is. Just you see, we tend to speak a lot about the DA's. Let's stick to the DA for a second. About the DA's
I was
failure
expecting
to
you to talk about
communicate,
some
to relate to people, to I don't know, to do what, to be able to convince people to vote for it. We are always critical of how it fails to present something that can attract people. But we hardly speak about also the voter. I have been very much critical of the voter in South Africa. I think our voters have been very much ignorant, given where the state of the country is, and the fact that we can continue voting for the same people, even though we see the challenges of crime, the challenges of shocking
Mhm,
unemployment rates, the
mhm.
blackouts, and so on. Yet we continue to put the same people into power and say that there is no alternative. So I think I also it's very much important not to always blame. People tend to always say, well, it's the political parties, they're not selling something to people. No, the voter is also in a democracy. The voter needs to be informed. The voter needs to see that something is wrong, and therefore I need to change the state of the country into I need to vote for an alternative. And I think our voters have failed us in that sense in South Africa. We should not leave them out
You
of this. That it doesn't
you
make
know
sense.
if you consider politics as a game of sport, right? The job of a sports team, which is the political party, is to get its fans to the stadium. It is the job of that sports team to get its fans to the stadium, to get its fans to support it, right? And when we consider who the voter is in South Africa, and there are so many aspects to who the voter is and why they vote the way that they vote, and also considering the fact that as we look at the numbers today, we have got a declining voters roll. So even though people are still showing up, we've had 5 elections, and the number is steadily declining, which means more and more people are opting out of the system. More and more people are just saying, this is not worth it for me to show up.
That's
And
also
again,
ignorance and
that is the job.
engagement. When
But
are you going to take responsibility?
the
When
job
are they
of
going
the
to take
political
responsibility?
party, like the job of a soccer club, is to get its fans to the stadium.
And
When you
what is
talk
the job
about
of the voter?
when we're going to talk about the job of the voter, we also have to consider that we sit in a country of 60 million people, where the median age of people in this country is 26 years old. That person, 25, 26-year old, that person needs to be educated
But
about their
guys,
responsibility as a
the,
their
the
civil
best
duty.
the best news is that former President Jacob Zuma has not discounted the possibility of re-entering the political fray. This is exciting, is it not? Is this not the solution to all of our problems? I mean, objectively, South Africa was better under Zuma. So maybe we need him back.
Gareth, you say that's a new joke.
No, I'm not
But
joking.
actually, for
I'm
a
not
lot of
joking.
people, you know, you and I living in the city may complain about having intermittent power because we've always had power, and now that the power grid is failing us, it irritates us to no end. But if you are a person living out in Khalishiwe, for instance, and you come from a reality where you never had power, having power 3 times a week is a hell of a difference, right? And that's the reality. That's the truth of of the matter, is that this country has multiple realities, and those multiple realities for you and I sitting here in Joburg and sitting in Cape Town and sitting in Durban are not necessarily the same as 60-70% of this country.
I was not
Yeah.
joking when I said things ran better. At least we knew what we were dealing with Jacob Zuma. And people get uncomfortable when you say this, but we knew we were dealing with someone who was greedy and who was corrupt and who had friends who would help to facilitate corruption. But at least they kept things running, more or less. Okay, better than Cyril's government. And I mean, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed is king. So let's just look at how we are at the moment, and let's look at how we were 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, when the 2010 World Cup was on, who was our president? Jacob Zuma. And I know that's, really Sepp Blatter was, but that was probably the highlight of post 1997 government, was Sepp Blatter as president. Let's not forget that.
Mm.
Well, my view is that I think people forget. It's easy to forget. Under Jacob Zuma, South Africa's state really declined. Even when you look at the GDP per capita on GDP per capita terms, we
Yeah.
declined as a country, got poorer, right? The state capture cost about, I think it was plus $6 billion that was basically looted. That money could have been used to achieve a lot of things. We look at things like public debt as well, unemployment rates, they kind of skyrocketed. Really, South Africa made huge losses, or um, the gains that we got in our democracy. We saw those gains being reversed a lot
Yeah.
under Jacob Zuma's administration. Now, people say, well, there weren't as much, load sheddings under Jacob Zuma, but really, those guys were not maintaining the infrastructure at
No.
ESCOM. So there was a lot of mismanagement. So they sort of postponed the matter to it's now happening at this point, because really there was not of any sort of
Yeah.
commitment to fix the issues.
Let me
So let's not forget, guys, that Jacob Zuma's administration was damaging to the country.
we always talk about the president, but let's talk about some people who are just on the next level down and who are still around, trying to make a living and still trying to convince us that they are part of the solution, not the problem. And we see Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who I believe is telling people that one of the reasons that she would be a great and visionary candidate for the future of South Africa is because she's been in so many portfolios. I mean, the fact that she hasn't necessarily run any of them particularly well is besides the point, but she seems to be convinced by the fact that she's jumped around so many times now that she knows a little bit about everything and she would be better than all the alternatives. And we've got Pravin Gordhan, who's also moved around like a chess piece on a board. And both of those people are just two out of the many examples. And we know so many of the names in cabinet who've really just been shuffled and shuffled and shuffled. And we call it a cabinet reshuffle because it's the same deck of cards. Nothing ever changes. Why is it that we are so short of good people, not only in the ANC, but generally? Phumi, you said it yourself just now, young people who want to enter the political fray. And even if you look at the Youth League in the ANC, the average age is now well over 30, probably even 35. Why is it that so many of those apathetic voters are young people? And does it have anything to do with the fact that all the people that we are reshuffling in and out of government offices are old?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. They're just there are too many old ideas and there are too many old realities at play. You know, people are unable to think of what South Africa needs to move to and become. Somebody in a conversation a couple of weeks ago, somebody said to me, and that's why this is such an important time in our country right now, right? Is that there's a reason why the children of Israel wandered the desert for 40 years, is because they had to die out. All of the people that had to leave Egypt. That's why it takes a generation, right?
Yeah.
All the old people that saw the world through the guise of being a slave under Pharaoh had to die off in order for them to be able to cross Jordan into a promised land. And South Africa is in that place. All of the old people who have an old view of what South Africa should be and could be, this is the end for all of them. I think every one
Yep.
of those old people
Wow.
need to be thrown out.
You're making me think of what Musi Maimane said, and it upset so many people about, he's so rude about the elderly and our elders. But he said it before, and he said those people have to die out before this country can really change. And my goodness, they're taking a long time.
And we're here. But it also, one of the things is there is a level of respect that people kind of imbue on older people, right? It is also a matter of, and this is where I absolutely disagree with Phumlani, is this is why we need new parties and new blood, because with all the will in the world, the ANC, even if they had new young leaders moving into those positions, will never be able to change who it is in its DNA. It was a great car in its time, but the time it must be put out to pasture now, right? And
Yes.
this is why we need fresh blood, fresh thinking, new young people with new ideas of how we can get our country back to the top that it can be. And that's why we need new parties. It's not going to be Bantu Holomisa thinking differently. It's not going to be an IFP thinking differently or young people in the IFP. It is young people who have to step up to the challenge, and young people who have the interest of this country at heart, young people who have the knowledge, young people, and we have them in bucket loads, but they opt to leave the country because they would rather take the easy route instead of taking the hard route and knuckle down and be part of the solution.
Do you want to add anything to that,
Well,
Phumlani? Because I do want to
well,
refer to something Phumi's just mentioned, but go ahead.
yeah. So, young people are going to leave the country if you have 71 people murdered per day, which is a shocking murder rate, even by global standards. They are going to leave if you have almost half of the workforce jobless, right? And 75% of the unemployed, it's young people.
Hmm.
With this education, they are going to go and look for opportunities elsewhere. If you can make more money overseas in other emerging markets than here, then they will go there. So again, we cannot, those decisions, people make them because of how the current people who are governing the country have mismanaged the economy and the country as well, and therefore they opt for those options, which is to one of them is to leave the country. Now, on the issue of very much our very old governance that we have, older people, and I'm at a conference here in Sun City this week, and I listened to, I think there's a gentleman called Joel Nichitenze.
Nechitenze from the
Yeah, he was.
ANC.
Yes, he was. He has really served in serious positions in the ANC, and he gave a talk last night. When I was listening to him, really, we need a different shift of mindset on how we talk about issues. He's still stuck to this old way of looking at things in South Africa, especially very much on racial terms. Of how a reference to the past, looking at the past instead of the future, proposing more government interventionist approach to the economy. I'm like, my view is that we need sort of more ideas that will be focused on the now and the future, and that need to be, at least in my view, very much pro business, pro driven by the purpose to advance the powers of the market, to get more people employed and all that. So I'm saying that if we can have that, young people are disengaged. Now, two things are happening with young people. They are disengaged, but they are also, if they do engage, they are very much left voting more of left-wing kind of parties. Even in America as well, Bernie Sanders, the far left or the left-wing guy, has a huge support over the years, right? Many of that support, the young people are supporting him. In South Africa, the youth also votes very much EFF when they do vote. EFF has very much a big chunk of the vote from the young people. So those things are happening. And when it comes to education, Phumi, I do agree that we need to educate people as to the importance of voting, right? But I think that's more done from a governance sort of government perspective, that we create awareness of the importance of people engaging in their democracy. But even still, though, those people, even though we do educate them, they will also need to take some responsibility to be engaged, to learn, and to make a difference in their country, because we cannot sort of remove that responsibility as voters in a democracy from them.
Things like murder rates for me and high crime are they're symptoms of a broken system, and they can be turned around. I think about New York in the 90s, in the early 90s, people were getting shot in the streets. And look where New York is today. Those things can be turned around, but it takes a will from the people to want to make it. I mean, Joel Nechitenze is exactly one of the people. He is a brilliant mind. And at some point in time was one of the main thinkers and drivers of policy coming out of Lutuli House, Shell House and Lutuli House. But he's 65 years old. Of course, he only sees the world in a prism of black and white. And this is my point, is we actually have to think a little bit broader than black, white, left, right. All of those things no longer hold water, even, and this is possibly one of the reasons why young people, and in our office we talk about this a lot, because we're constantly thinking about what it is that we need to do even within our organization to shift and move and make a difference, right, with our clients, with our country as a whole. And maybe the things that resonate with young people are some of those things, because the thing about looking at more than just oneself and thinking broader than just an individual are things that resonate with young people. But for as long as we look at it as it's a left wing policy or a right wing policy, maybe we need to look at all the policies and look at what it is that works for individuals and for the country as a whole today, without
Yeah.
being so dogmatic about where we stand on the number line.
Well, I mean, here's what worries me is that we're losing the people we really need. I mean, here's a story this is not new. That comes up every year. This is from Business Tech. More skilled black professionals are leaving South Africa. If you look at the white population of South Africa, and this is to your point, Phumlani, if this tiny percentage, 8% of the population, is still the biggest problem, and they are in decline and they are getting smaller and smaller, then
They're
I think
not.
people who are proffering this as as a problem are not looking at the big picture. I mean, those 4 million odd white people who are still in South Africa and want to be here or have no option but to be here are going to have to make a go of it. And they are increasingly going to be less and less of a problem to the people who don't like them. So let's stop talking about that. It's not a big deal.
No, it's not a big deal. The race thing is it's a card that's being used by politicians to manipulate us in politics. The even when you do the surveys, um, even when you do
Manipulate us.
yeah, I mean, even if you do the surveys that have been done, the race thing to people it doesn't appear at the top.
Right.
It's something that either is not there or right at the bottom. People talk about the issues of unemployment,
Right.
crime, and so on. So it's not. It's something that's being it's politicians who beat the drum on this thing as if it's something that matters to people. And by the way, the existence of the white population, it's a positive in the country, right? Just like it's a positive for other racial groups as well. And they are contributing. They are participating in the economy. That they sell, they buy, they have businesses, and also they are largely a middle class. And that is the white population. All those things are positive and good, and we need more of that in the country. So to make them as these people who are sort of more of to be obsessed and see them as a negative, and that they are declining for me, as per the chart you've showed, is concerning. It's something that Ramaphosa must look into and think about how do we sort of encourage people to stay. What are they doing wrong in governance? As Phumi was saying, the issues that I mentioned, even the murder rate, sure, it can be reversed, but the leaders have to reverse that. You see, and for people who are participating in the market, if the leaders they let them down, they can either choose to leave, and they do
All
have
right.
their choice, and many of them choose to do so.
I want to quickly turn our attention, because we've only got 5 minutes or so left, overseas. We've got to look at the UK and the meltdown in the UK's economy. But also, Phumi, someone here has asked for your thoughts on what's going on in Iran, which we actually haven't referred to at all in the Burning Platform, despite the last 2 weeks being absolutely groundbreaking and earth shattering. In Iran, we see a huge revolution taking place, even though they're trying to play it down, over one woman who was taken aside by the morality police and victimized over her hijab falling down or something silly like that. Anyway, the women of Iran and a lot of the men of Iran are standing up to the government and saying, no more. We're sick of this. I mean, this used to be a country which was much more secular, that was much more about a society that has a very ancient history, which is in some ways the antithesis of what has been created under the Ayatollahs. And maybe you want to comment on that and the UK, and both of you have a go.
It's fascinating for me to watch what's happening in Iran. And as we talk about it here all the time, it's always about the will of the people. The people decide when they have had enough, and the people decide when they want change, and the way that change needs to be. You know, we were just looking at the world population and where the populations are. The thing about the world is we cannot any longer look at the world only through our perspective to say what is right is what we believe is right. It is what is right for the people living in the environment. And when you see what is happening in Iran right now, is the people of Iran are going, we do not agree with this way of living and this way of being, and we're not going to stand for it anymore. And that's why they are standing up to the government. But for as long as things were working for them, they were happy to go with what it was, what is, and this is the thing. And no matter how abhorrible it may be for the rest of us on the outside looking in, this is what we're seeing in Iran.
What do you say, Phumlani? Anything about
Yeah.
Iran, or do you want to look at the UK?
Well, I do agree with Phumi that when people have said it's enough, people can say it's enough when they are ready to say it's enough. When they want to say it's enough. So I'm quite. This is putting much pressure to the Iranian sort of political leadership, and it's very much motivating in a way that here's a country that is known for decades of being sort of very much hardly tolerates such things. The protests and the movements, yet and the way they treat women there as well. Very much little freedoms for women in the Middle East. Yet we are seeing the women in Iran sort of taking it up and making their case. So I think that is very much encouraging, and it's something that we should applaud around the globe, and hopefully African people will do the same in countries where there is that kind of there is some repression, that they will mobilize against their governments. Now the UK, I think Kwasi Kwarteng, the finance minister, look, he shouldn't. I don't think he should pull back. There's much pressure. He's being told that he needs to reverse the plan to avoid the market kind of chaos. No, I don't think he should, because I mean the policies that he puts forward are policies that are very much well known for a long while. Now it's a matter of the investors. They need to adjust, and if he does believe if he and his boss, the prime minister, do believe that this is what the policy will achieve, then they must stick to that. They should not, politically, it should be bad if they do reverse. And it wouldn't be the good thing as well, because the policies that they are proposing, the tax cuts, aren't the bad thing. They do stimulate the economy. So they must persist on that. And the investors, they will adjust and move on. Markets go up and down. It is what it is.
Pums, what do you want to throw in on the UK? What do you say about the where is it a meltdown? Are we overplaying this just because, again, the UK has been the leading economy in Europe for the longest time? I mean, certainly outside of the EU for a while as well. Financially, they're still the world's hub of banking and of lending and of financing. So what do we think's really going on here? What is this all about?
By the way, the trends were already in the negative direction even before this plan. So the pound, it's weakening, and all that. Just the economy wasn't in any. So this is the way of stimulating the economy.
Okay.
Is the sun finally setting on the empire? Is the sun finally setting on the empire?
Well, I thought that the Queen's death was not just symbolic. I do think it's the end of it. Really.
It is, Gareth. It is. When I saw the article, and I was reading it this morning with the IMF criticizing the UK's budget, mini budget, I was fascinated to see how things have turned. Right, we're used to seeing the IMF criticizing what is now called Global South and what they do with their monetary policies and what they're doing with their tax cuts and. But it's also just looking at it worldwide, right? So looking at what's happening with the Fed, we're going to see similar movements happening across the pond, as the British would say. But this, and unfortunately, because we have an inept government, would be great for us, right? Because this would mean that money is looking for a new home, a new place to invest, new places to go. And we are used to working in a high inflationary environment, right? These inflation rises here in South Africa, that's the norm for us. And so we should ideally be able to work with what we have and be able to attract. But we're going to squander this opportunity as South Africa. I think we're going to squander this opportunity, and we're not going to do what needs to be done because unfortunately we're busy with our own internal squabbles. But what's happening in the UK is very fascinating for me to watch. It really is. And it's not just the UK, it's the whole world that we're watching. And maybe it's time that the shifting sands, and it's an opportunity for some people to make money if they're watching in the right places.
Sure, but let's not break the fence until we know why it was built. That's what Chesterton always said, and it makes me nervous when we go, oh, well, whatever comes next will be better than what we've got, and then it isn't. We've seen governments make those terrible decisions. I've just got to refer here quickly to K&A, who's made a few interesting points throughout the show. It's a bit like a budget prepared by Des van Rooyen. So I'll give K&A the last say in today's show. Thank you, everybody. Have an awesome day, and we will be back next Thursday. Thank you so much, Phumlani, for being part of the show, as you always are available to be. And we would love to hear from you. You can send us an email, contact@cliffcentral.com. And if it's something for Phumi, you send it to me and I'll send it on to her as well. We will see you tomorrow at 6 a.m. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Thursday. Bye-bye.